probably all seen cartoons of bears going up to honeybee colonies and getting the honey. Everybody knows that bears like honeybees, but most people think that what bears are actually going for when they visit a honeybee colony is that they're going for the honey. But in reality, the honey is really just a dessert. The reason bears visit honeybee colonies is to consume brood, bees, pollen, everything in that nest. But specifically, they go after brood for a protein and fat-rich resource. Bears represent one of the greatest vertebrate threats to honeybee colonies around the world, of course, in areas where bears are present. Bears will often visit the apiaries at nighttime, go into those apiaries, and completely destroy the apiaries in search of what they're going to get. Again, brood, honey, pollen, etc. So bears not only represent a problem for the colonies living in the hives, but they also represent a problem for the physical hives themselves. The bears will do a lot of equipment damage en route into that nest so they can get the food resources that they want. Bears will pick up hives and carry them away from the apiary. They'll come tonight and take this hive out. They'll come a week from now and take that hive out. So once bears have found an apiary, they tend to make repeated visits over time until the beekeeper discovers it and does something about it, or until all the colonies are destroyed and the resources are completely abandoned by the bees. Bear problems are always best addressed before you have a bear problem. If you're keeping bees in areas where bears are present, you have to proactively be ready for the bears. You have to get your apiaries ready before there's an apiary. So what do I mean by that? There are really a handful of ways that bears are addressed with regard to apiaries. First of all, you can just keep your bees in areas where bears aren't present. We live in Florida. Florida is full of bears from top to bottom, from east to west. So everywhere one puts colonies, you could encounter bears. But there are some areas in Florida where there are higher bear densities and lower bear densities. So knowing the bear densities in your area, if you live in an area with bears, really helps you decide where to place your apiaries. In reality, the next two pieces of advice that I give you are best followed before you have a bear problem. Once bears find your apiary, they're going to work through those deterrents that you use to get back to those apiaries and get those colonies. So the two things that people will often do then is they will often use a bear fence or an electric fence around the apiary, or they may put their hives up on very tall platforms to discourage bear access. Now, bears can climb. So I would argue that the platform route is really not the most feasible for most beekeepers around the world. First of all, you have to build a platform, then you have to put the bees up there, and then you have to go up and down every time you want to work it. So rather than go the platform route, I much prefer the electric fence route, which is a really great deterrent to keep bears out of the apiary. Before I talk more about the electric fence, I will say that it is possible in some areas around the world that your local Fish and Wildlife Service might be able to do something to help out with nuisance bears. I'm not talking about killing bears, but maybe trapping bears and relocating bears, etc. I'm not going to go into much detail about this option. I'm just going to make the point to say if you have bear populations in your area, you probably have some local, state, regional, provincial, or maybe even national organization that can help you address nuisance bear problems in your area. But for most beekeepers who keep bees in areas where bears are present, it's going to be best to use the electric fence. This is kind of a global standard. It's a great way to keep bears out of the apiary. Just a couple of caveats. Caveat number one, you've got to have that fence up before you put bees in it. Because if you are responding retroactively to a bear problem, in other words, bears have come into your apiary, destroyed hives, so you think now maybe I've got to go put up a fence, it's really too late. If they've found the hives and gone into those hives and taken out the colony resources, you putting up a bear fence after that's going to do very little to dissuade bears from going back to that apiary. So if you know bears are in an area, put up the fence first, then put the apiary in that fence. Caveat number two, bear fences are not set it and forget it. You've got to maintain those things. They need a power supply to electrify those wires. I'll talk about that in a moment. grass grows and will touch the wires, or maybe tree limbs will touch the wires, which could ground those wires and make the fences ineffective. Every time you visit the apiary, you need to test that fence and make sure that it is working. It requires maintenance. So what I want to do now is I want to go through the setup for a typical bear fence that you would establish before you put bees into an apiary. I'll go stepwise, talk about some of the things that you can do, some of the strategies for putting up the fence. I'll list some very specific materials that you can purchase. And hopefully if you do this in advance of placing your apiary, then you could have a really good deterrent system for bears. Just a quick thing to say, how do you know if you have bears in your area? Well, check with other local beekeepers. They've probably had to deal with bears if they're in the area themselves, and they'll be able to say, hey, this area has a great density or population of bears. You might want to keep your bees here, or here's what I do to ensure bears aren't getting into my apiary, or maybe they can give you some recommendations regarding an electric fence. Now let me talk a little bit about the supplies that you're going to need to build a bear fence. You're going to need some sort of posts, insulators for those posts, electric fence wire, insulated handles, a fence charger, a grounding rod, a clamp, warning signs, and a voltmeter. And I'll explain how you integrate all of these together collectively to produce that bear fence. Go to the location where you want to site your apiary, and you're going to have to picture it fully stocked with your colonies so you can get a good image of the footprint necessary for the fence. And you're going to want to install fence posts into the ground, leaving at least a 3-foot or about 1 meter buffer between the fence and where you will locate the hives. Otherwise, bears can reach through the fence, grab the hives, and pull them out of the fence. So you want to make sure there will be about a 3-foot or 1 meter buffer between the fence wire and where you're going to locate the hives. You're going to need to place a fence post at the 4 corners of where you'll have your apiary, as well as one post every 8 feet or about 2.5 meters around those 4 posts. You want to drive those posts about 1.5 feet or roughly 0.5 meter into the ground. Next, you want to install 3 insulators to each of the posts. These should be installed at approximately 8, 20, and 32 inches from the ground. That's 20, 50, and 80 centimeters from the ground. Following this, you want to wrap the electric fence wire around the lowest insulator. Then you're going to pull it tight across to the other insulators that are at the same level, that bottom level. Go from the first insulator all the way around back to that first insulator at the bottom level. Then you're going to stretch it to the next level of insulators and repeat that process. You don't want to cut the wire between the levels. You want to keep that wire that you go around the first level and then move up, go around the second level, and then move up and go around the third level. When you've done this, cut the wire, leaving about 2 feet or 60 centimeters of wire past that last or uppermost insulator once you've finished wiring all 3 levels. Now you need to add an entrance into your apiary. So what you'll do is you'll go to one of the posts that will essentially be one of the gate posts, and you're going to take all 3 wires at that post and cut the wire to where there's about 1 foot or 30 centimeters of wire from the cut to the post. So you'll have a very long piece of wire coming from the post beside it and a short piece of wire that's still affixed to the post where you cut it. You want to take that long piece of wire and loop the end of the wire through one of the insulated handles and then feed that wire back on itself, twisting that wire around itself. So basically you've created a long piece of wire with an insulated handle. That insulated handle should attach to that 1 foot or 30 centimeters of wire that's coming off the other post where you cut it. So you'll take that 1 foot or 30 centimeters of wire, you'll create a loop using that wire, you'll wrap it around itself, and so with the insulated handle, you'll be able to attach it to the loop on that shorter piece of wire. You want to do this at all 3 levels of wire that you have on the fence. Next, you want to install another post inside the fenced area near where that wire ends. If you remember, as you wired all 3 levels, you left about 2 feet or 60 centimeters of wire sticking out at that top level. That needs to be able to run to the post that you stuck inside the fence. That post is the one that you're going to attach the fence charger to, and the wire from the fence will need to attach to the fence charger. That charger can be battery operated. It may have solar panels to keep that battery charged, or depending on your access to a nearby electrical outlet, maybe you can plug that fence post charger into that outlet. You're going to attach the loose end of that uppermost level of wire to the positive terminal on the fence post charger. Next, you want to drive a 6-foot or about 1.8 meter grounding rod into the ground, leaving only about 6 inches or just 10 centimeters sticking out of the ground. You're going to do this really close to the post where you place the fence charger. You want to install a clamp onto the rod, that part of the rod that's sticking out of the ground, and you're going to connect that clamp to the negative or ground terminal of the fence charger using a piece of electric wire. At this point, your fence should be fully operational. There's probably a switch on the fence charger where you can flip it and it will come on either powered by solar or battery, or solar and battery, or through an electrical outlet. Bears are amazing wildlife. They're incredible creatures. They occur in many places all over the world, but there are going to be nuisance encounters between bears and your bees if you keep bees in an area where bears are present. Keep in mind, put up that electric fence before you put your apiary there, and you'll really go a long way to limiting bear impact on your bees.